Welcome to the first episode of our Neurodiversity Graduate Education podcast. Today, I will be speaking with Dr. Lexi Hain, who is an assistant professor at University of Connecticut Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Lexi. Thank you for making time to do this. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So how about we start with a brief introduction of yours. I want you to tell us what you're doing. And also, I want you to touch on why you're doing this. What's your motivation for that? It's something definitely that's not you do every day. You don't go around record interviews. So
Definitely
I really
not.
want to know what's your motivation for doing this.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me, particularly during, the first episode. I'm very excited to be here. As you mentioned, I'm currently an assistant professor here at UConn in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And the topic of neurodiversity in higher ed and grad school in particular is near and dear to my heart. I'm a little outside of it now. I feel like if I just kind of having the opportunity to go back and give advice to people who are maybe at that stage of their PhD. Probably better than anyone the amount of tears and tribulations involved in my PhD. So I'm just happy to kind of share my story rather than being able to reach one or two people that I normally talk to about going to grad school, just to be able to share with a broader audience and help kick off this podcast series that I'm sure is going to be really great. I know some of the speakers that you have lined up, so just excited to be a part of it.
So for us to get a better idea about how recent that past is, when did you get your PhD?
I got my PhD in May 2019.
Okay. So you remember all the details?
Oh, yes. I couldn't forget some of them if I tried.
So let's move into some of your K-12 education experiences. And the reason for that, I want the audience to feel more connection. And I hope that some of your experiences as someone with dyslexia resonates with some of our audience. Some of the challenges you had as someone who is not like a, by definition, standard or traditional student. So, and I want you to cover 12 years of experience, but see what you can do.
I don't think I'm going to have too much there from the maybe K to 2 range, except I remember line dancing very vividly. But apart from that, K to the kindergarten through second grade, not too many experiences there. But overall, it is a very broad range. That's really when you're becoming a person. There's a lot of change that's going on there. But there are a few themes that I feel like are pretty consistent throughout. I always loved math, with the exception of just like 1 point in ninth grade. It's just like very traumatic for me. We'll get there. I don't know how long we have for the K to 12 section, but overall, I was very good at school. But I feel like my education, even up through college, it was more about knowing what the system wanted, more so than learning a lot of the time. I was very good at knowing kind of what was going to be on tests and very good at memorization. So I was able to kind of use those skills in certain areas to cover up from the other challenges that I had, namely with reading and writing.
So you powered through, you struggled through. Why? Why you never thought about getting support, accommodation, being registered on a special program?
Yeah, I think at that age, it's mostly up to parents. And I think particularly in my K to 8 education, it was a very unique situation where I'm from a very small town. My grade had 20 students in it, and it was pretty much the same 20 students from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade. So when you were doing well academically, or when you're being compared to, a relatively small pool of students and there's only so many resources, that if I had any sort of accommodations, apparently this is something I've learned in recent years, then that would have just been me put into more of a special education classroom it wouldn't be fit to my needs with both my challenges and my strengths. So I really just developed kind of like my own tools to get around that. And it's hard looking back because I think so much of what I put on myself for, freaking out trying to figure out which section I'm going to have to read out loud, or maybe comparing myself to others and saying I'm so good at these things, but I'm not the best in this area. Why not? I think it would have helped to have that sort of acceptance and understanding. But at the same time, I think I'm fortunate in a way, with the amount of stigma that there is, to have been kind of sheltered from that, and just to say, this is who you are. These are the things that you're good at. These are the things that maybe you're better at. This might be hard for you, and that's okay. And not be treated any differently because of that. Because I know, talking to students now, when we're talking about accommodations or maybe their previous experiences in K-12, it can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And that's innate, particularly middle school. Middle school's the worst. Yeah. You don't want a finger pointed at you or really anything to be different. You just want to fit in. So I think it really goes both ways, and that's part of the bigger societal issue. Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. Yeah, I would say even just having this conversation, it's funny what things kind of come back. And we've talked about this a lot kind of offline, and realizing these kind of experiences that are so ingrained, so painful. One of those, I think it was in first grade. I joked before that, I'm not going to remember the early parts, but I remember that we got put into reading groups. Mm-hmm. That basically, when we went to the library, we were assigned a color. And that was basically like what books you could take out because they were at your reading level. Mm-hmm. And I remember not being in the highest group and having my friend be in the highest group, and feeling that sort of difference starting then. So it's just, and I haven't thought about that, and I don't know. No. It hasn't come up in recent years of therapy. It's funny what certain discussions bring out. So it really is that isolating feeling.
They are there, those maybe moments we felt, I have ADHD and dyslexia myself, and the moments we felt embarrassed, ashamed, just because of the color of that card, or being called to read aloud. I mean, that was the most traumatic.
Yes.
Those were the most traumatic experiences I had, and I was like counting paragraphs. I mean, like, which one is going to be mine, so I can kind of like go over that. Hopefully I'm not going to miss the word.
Oh, I did the same thing.
So it was just like so painful, and it's past, but even today, I cannot really say for sure the emotions attached to those experiences, they don't interfere in my operation when it comes to like writing something, even writing a paper proposal. So the pain, the trauma of that, I believe that exists. And although we have figured it out, we survived, but one of the reasons I think it's still painful to get involved in certain activities is just it triggers those pains and traumas. And I think there is no other good reason for me to be scared of or procrastinating to death to work on a one-page, write-up than some past painful memories. I mean, I don't know if you've thought about that, if you reflected on that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've done so many similar things, and you were my PhD advisor. I think you know how much I procrastinated on anything that had to do with writing. And I think I'm still working on that a lot. I still have that sort of feeling. I need the external deadline, something to force me to do it. But, as I'm working through some of these things, it's also that, that external deadline. If it makes me rush, then I have something else to kind of blame rather than myself if I don't get the output that I desire. I mean, particularly in academia, it's most present when it comes to publications. Yeah. And that's something, I think it's going to take a longer time to work through, and just more broadly being able to deal with that criticism and not feel it as personally is something I really struggle with. I really internalize all of those things, and it's painful.
Yeah. Taking any technical comment or something that is just, like, for example, we we are in the business of publishing papers. We get our papers peer reviewed, we receive comments, and it took me a while to realize that they are commenting on the technical content, right? They're not criticizing my personality. They're not talking about, oh, what a deficient person you are who wrote this paper. So it took me a while to draw that separation, and I still think some of those emotions get triggered no matter what I do. Awareness is helpful. Asking myself, am I upset about this comment because I'm taking it personally, or it's just like it's an irrelevant technical comment? And maybe asking that question at points, it's going to be helpful to maybe draw some distinction. So we can talk about our elementary school, middle school experiences for hours, but I
I
want to move
know.
to your college experience. Let's why did you choose engineering, and what was your motivation? And tell us a little bit about your experience during your undergrad. That's also very helpful.
Sure. I mean, my motivation for choosing engineering, I do a lot of outreach, and I always wish I had something that was really empowering, really exciting. It's very much that kind of typical, oh, you do well in math and science. Here's a career. And my biggest thing, the only thing I was worried about was, am I going to go to college and be able to get a job? All I cared about was, am I going to make a good living and have a job? Just wanting that sort of stability and not
So
graduating.
no fancy reason because you loved Legos or you always built car.
No, no, I was way more of like an American Girl doll, Barbie sort of thing. Like, no, I don't think I ever played with Legos.
Yeah.
Not at all. I didn't have any, those like the construction equipment. Nah, no, that wasn't me.
So
I picked civil
that's
engineering because I
interesting.
knew what bridges were, and like
Yeah.
I didn't understand what the other engineering types were.
But here we
And
are,
here
right?
we are.
So like it worked out. I mean, like we never you can't say you need very good motivations for things to work out. I mean, like even you go with maybe
No,
an open mind,
and I
things
mean,
work out, right?
I went to
And here
UConn.
you are in the faculty in engineering department.
I only applied to two schools. I applied to UConn and Northeastern. I got into both. UConn was cheaper, and I didn't want to have crushing student loan debt. And I was like upset about going here initially. I was like, oh, I want to be in Boston. I just want to be in Boston. But like you said, it's all about just what you go into it with. Like you
In
can,
your mindset.
yeah, your mind.
Yeah.
There's so many other things that make up your life, and there's in engineering, it's so broad. You can find something that you like in it, unless you hate engineering
I
all
totally agree
along.
with that.
But it's like just go
Yeah.
into it, be open.
I used to think that there is only one thing, one global optimal path. That if I can find that, if I can think very carefully and I make sure that I choose that path over other ones, that guarantees my success. It's nowadays I'm more thinking like no matter what I'm doing, if I just can change my mindset so I love it and enjoy it, that becomes the best thing that I could do. So I'm trying to practice that more rather than putting a lot of thoughts in like, okay, what is the best approach here? What is the best path? And I think I was thinking, I mean, like I saw a lot of that in you. You really took on challenges. You jumped on different opportunities in terms of your undergrad because I remember like I knew you before even before you take my undergraduate design of steel structures class, and you were heavily involved in like student clubs, extracurricular activities. You really
All about
enjoyed the
building
experience,
that
right?
resume.
Yeah.
I was like, I will get a
Wow.
job.
Okay.
I will get a job. I will make money.
But you acted as if you're really enjoying it. I remember like when I interacted with you as part of some club activities, I thought you're just like so dedicated to it. You're really enjoying it.
Oh yeah. I mean, once I got into it, definitely for the people reasons, really
Yeah.
like. I mean, I will say, Concrete Canoe was a lot more fun than
Yeah.
ASCE. But yeah, just getting to form connections with people in your major. I was in like the classes I took were kind of separated, so I didn't have any friends in my major until like junior year, really senior year. So those clubs kind of helped form those connections. And I'm a big people person. So that made me feel kind of like more at home in the department,
Hmm.
where my other college friends were spread across all majors. And, they would still, my best friend still, she's a teacher, and she would just make fun of me. She's like, your class is concrete design. Like, what are you, what are you talking about? So I think it's really about just finding those connections and different things.
I think this is important. It's not just like a side story about you. I think this is important for students who are struggling, who think that they've lost all the interest, who started a major, thought it's gonna be a certain way, and when they go to classes, they're not really, I mean, like seeing that they don't find anything interesting. So I think the options are beyond classroom. So I think that's
Absolutely.
what I did also. I was heavily involved in some extracurricular activities. And honestly, I was just like so fed up with my classes my sophomore year. It's just like, this is not my thing. I mean, like, this is not what I thought it is gonna be. I thought I'm gonna learn about cool structures. I mean, like, and it was all out of context, dry material that I had to learn and do homeworks for. But engaging in some of the club activities and getting to know more senior students, and like that, oh, it's coming, I have to just like hang in there. And so that is something probably helpful to those that they're not seeing any hope, just going to classrooms and dealing with some material that is not the same thing as they thought, and they chose their major. So that's,
Also, most people choose their major at 18
yeah.
with no background. Like that gets into like much bigger problems with how I feel about like the system. Like, you don't know when you're 18 years old and you've had minimal life experiences what you want to do.
My daughter asked me yesterday that if I would choose the same civil engineering major if I had to do it again. And this was the first time after so many long years I thought about that. And for the first time, my answer was no. And I was very sure about that.
Really?
It was very
I'm
clear.
I'm surprised that it was the first time the answer was no.
Yeah, the answer no. Before I thought no, no. I mean, like, there is nothing that I don't like about it. But yesterday, when she asked me that question, I thought, no. I mean, I really think, and I'm going back to what you said, that at 18 they don't know. Kids 18 years old, they don't know what they like, what they're gonna like when they're 40. I mean, my 40, I don't know. Actually, this time I have the courage to say for sure that, like, when I'm 60, I don't know what I'm gonna like. But now I know that my 18-year-old was incapable of identifying what my interest is gonna be when I will be 40. So that's very true what you said. But yet they have to choose a major, and that's why, again, like, keeping an open mind and open heart, having the right mindset, make the experience work no matter what.
I
So
will advise that I do think you should go to college and have an idea of a job that you should get afterwards. I think just all the pressure that comes from that. Like, I'd have to say, I don't think the best route is necessarily like absolutely follow your passion and go to college for it. Like, in the landscape that we live in, when loans and everything are a thing, I think do something that you like, don't do something you hate, but talk to a few people that are in industry or academia or something, that the area where you feel yourself going,
mhm,
and make sure that you have at least an idea of a job, because that's a whole other area of pressure that
yeah,
comes in, that I'm still happy that I made that choice for that reason.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I was able to make decisions based on what I actually wanted because I had that as the backup plan of knowing I'm in a field with so many opportunities.
Yeah. So, was there any particular time during your undergrad degree that you realized your dyslexia is standing in your way, impeding your success in one way or another? Do you have any specific memory in mind that you can share with us?
I would say that I was pretty lucky in the fact that I think the areas for me that would come out more so would be in more of those gen eds. and I came into college with a good amount of AP credits. So I didn't have to necessarily go through that. I think, my bigger problem that I had in college was more so about just relying on my skills that I developed from being dyslexic, like my memorization, rather than learning the information, and just the imposter syndrome that went along with that. And then there's so many other things that get pulled into that, like being a woman in engineering, seeing my peers, the confidence issues.
Yeah.
So I think it's the confidence really that tied to more of like my dyslexia. I know it impacted my confidence in a lot of academic situations.
Can you take some time to unpack it? Because that's such an important topic, and we just like brush over it typically by saying, "Oh, it impacted my confidence." Can you go a few levels deeper? Like, how does it manifest itself? It manifests itself like when you talk about confidence. Is it something that in the background that like you don't reach far because you have that hesitation that, oh, like it might be outside, my capabilities? Is it something that when you are doing a task, it adds more anxiety? Can you think about that more in terms of like how it impacts you on like daily life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I feel like the confidence issue is something that is just so ingrained that it still impacts me every day of my life. I second guess myself all the time. I always think someone's maybe more qualified. And this is something that hasn't gone away. I'm now in a tenure track position. I have a PhD in a certain field.
Yeah.
And I can logically look at it and say, well, why do you have these doubts? And it's something that's just never gone away. It's there all the time. Like I remember being in classes and thinking I knew the right answer, but not willing to say it because I'd be so embarrassed if I got it wrong. Think that was going to change someone's view of me. Like, oh, they're not going to think I'm smart anymore.
But you said something that like, I mean, you have a PhD, you are a professor now,
Yeah,
and yet you are in situations as scared of that kid in the classroom.
absolutely.
So that confidence, it does, you don't rewrite it, you don't fix the issue by just accomplishing more. It
No,
is,
I tried that. That didn't work. And sometimes I need that kind of external validation of, like, I remember sitting in therapy, them saying, like, they're not going to take your PhD away. Like, if you don't understand how to use this software, like, what are you so worried about? It is something that I'm still working on.
I'm happy that like probably some people who are listening to us, that they were thinking that, okay, we are gonna get specific to about like, for example, your challenge during an exam, that for example that it was like writing an essay right there, and like maybe examples like that because of your dyslexia. But I'm happy that we are talking about way more important things. I mean, because it doesn't matter, for example, if you didn't get a good grade when you submit an essay or like for your written exam. I mean, it was difficult because like thinking and writing wasn't like, maybe the best approach there. But what causes trouble, and I think you hit it in the head, that what causes problem is that baggage that gets carried over, which is the background, like the fear of being criticized, being pointed at, being feeling of fear of feeling that shame again, embarrassment. So those are the main problems, not like submitting a writing assignment. So that is,
Yeah, the easy ones, the
yeah.
easy ones to get over.
Because someone who makes it to the college, I mean, like definitely they can figure out how to write an essay. I mean, it's not going to be the huge thing. I
Yeah.
mean, like I had so much problem in my gen ed classes, so much problem. I just like terrible grade, and they all had to do with my dyslexia. But I think that was not the issue that I had, the main issue that I had because of dyslexia during my undergrad year. It was more on the impact that it had, the corrosive impact that it had on my confidence. And I hear you when you say that. It's very important. Now let's move to your graduate education. You did your PhD with me in the area of structural engineering, very exciting project funded by National Science Foundation. But we don't want to talk about like the topic of your research. We want to talk about some maybe motivations. What was the reason for you to accept my offer? I mean, I worked hard.
You did. That's one difference I'd say right there is we really have to take it back to the beginning when I think about, why did I get a PhD? And it was something that was not on my radar at all during college. And I think something for most American students, it's so ingrained in us to, finish high school, go to college, get a job. And that's kind of like the path that gets just pushed. And, it doesn't talk about how college isn't right for everyone. And, why would you go if it's, maybe you're not sure and you're going to have to take out all these loans. But in the same way, it's something that you do enjoy learning and you're doing a good job. We don't expose people to research early enough. Yeah. I didn't do research during my undergrad. I didn't know it was a thing. And maybe that is on me that I wasn't looking for these opportunities. And maybe that is on schools to, reach out at earlier times. And that is going to vary based on the institution. But there are so many opportunities when it comes to summer research during the academic year, whether you can go to a different institution. REU programs, research experience for undergraduates. Can I put in a plug for that? Yeah. Specifically, here at UConn, we have an NSF REU Site, which is a research experience for undergraduates. It's specifically for students that identify as neurodiverse. So whether they are on the spectrum, have ADHD, are dyslexic, we're really focused on giving them a really positive research experience because we know that's an environment that people with these different thinking styles can really excel in outside of the classroom. So I encourage you to just do a quick Google for UConn REU neurodiversity. It'll pop up and apply for the next year. But there's also REU sites that aren't focused on neurodiversity all over the country. So if you're at more of a teaching institution, a smaller school, community college, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved in research. And I just didn't know about it. Yeah. I didn't know about grad school until you brought it up senior year and caused like a meltdown of my future plans.
So I didn't have that question in my list, but I think it's valuable to spend some time on that because that research experience that you mentioned, you're the principal investigator on that project, our NSF-funded REU site. So the reason for doing that is what we realized through the previous project that I was the PI for, that students, neurodiverse students, my site was mainly focused on students with ADHD, dyslexia. We realized that no matter what their experiences are in the classroom, if they are matched with the right research faculty advisor, they really enjoy the project. They learn as much as they may learn in 3-4 classes during 10 weeks of research lab experience. And many of them, I am planning to talk to some of those REU students who ended up going to grad school. Some, they finished actually their PhD in recent years. So that was a very interesting observation. And we tried to kind of like share it with a broader community that like, I mean, they may have challenges in the classroom setting, but if you bring them to a setting that is more open, is less rigid, they can do things their own way. They can work on their own schedule. There is no set class time. I mean, it doesn't matter if they wake up a little late, as long as they spend enough time on the research project, they still make progress. They're not going to be penalized for that. All of those things. I mean, like they excel and they find their interest again in that area. And so that's very interesting that we are not necessarily offering that broadly in different institutions as one way of re-engaging non-traditional learners. And it goes beyond neurodiversity. I think research environment, the flexibility, the joy, the context, the real life context of it has the opportunity to resonate with students, offers the opportunity to resonate with students in a way that classroom setting, just dry, dull classroom setting cannot. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of value for students to get engaged in doing research during their undergraduate degree. I think that's very helpful for many reasons. For many reasons, yeah. So for your graduate education, how about that? How about challenges? I know that this time some of those coping strategies failed.
Oh my gosh, they failed so hard. You probably know some of this better than I do, so feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I will remind you probably if you have erased them from your mind. We don't want to trigger your bad memories, but I think it's important that our audience, because what we are doing is to trying to reach out to those that they are in grad school, they are considering going to grad school, they're finishing their undergrad, and for them to get a better sense of how graduate school life looks like for someone who is not a traditional learner. So going back to your PhD time, let's this time focus on some demanding writing assignments that you had, papers that you had to publish for graduating. Let's focus on that because I think that's a major consideration for someone with ADHD dyslexia, that they hate any type of writing assignment, and when they think about this being the requirement for them to be able to graduate, writing the dissertation, publishing. So at that point they may say like, no, absolutely not. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I'm not going to put myself through that.
Yeah.
'Cause why would
So
you want to? Well, I procrastinated heavily. And actually, I want to say the first two papers I published, I want to say, weren't on my PhD research, which looking back makes sense to me, is because I was so avoidant of the topics that had the pressure of, you have to publish these papers in order to graduate. And even some of them, I just kept doing the experimental work.
I remember that. I mean, like you were willing to spend endless hours in the lab. I remember.
Yeah. To convince myself
That you
that
were
I was
productive.
being so productive, just hours and hours, like sleeping in the office, doing all these things to try and just tell myself I'm being productive, even though it was on the wrong things, which now it worked out pretty well because I have all this data that I can, still continue to make findings from. But I think I really did need to, first of all, get involved in writing kind of with other people. So we worked on some proposals together, and not feeling like I was being judged on it, like being able to work on a writing assignment where I had no stake in it. If it didn't get funded, it wasn't because I did a bad job. It was something where I was in more of a supportive role, but I got to practice, getting the ideas out. Same thing with kind of editing other people's work. It taught me how maybe things should look and helped me build a little bit of confidence. So I felt like I could go to that writing stage.
So let me check something with you. That is, when I think back, this is something maybe that I can now say that like, okay, I felt that this could be the reason. It wasn't something that I realized back then. I was just like reminding you of the deadlines, reminding you of the importance of like submitting early so we have something in the pipeline when you get to the wrap up of your dissertation. I remember that now I again like look back, I can see a lot of hesitation giving me that draft or the section that you needed to complete because you
Absolutely.
wanted you had this intense fear of being criticized.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
okay.
And I really thrived on that kind of like positive feedback, but also nothing was more motivating to me than avoiding disappointment. So, I would push myself really hard in the lab or to do tasks that I know I could do.
Hmm.
But when it's handing over something and you're just awaiting judgment and when you don't feel confident in it, that's a really hard thing to, open yourself up to. Like, oh, what happens if he doesn't like this? You know? And that goes back to kind of your review style too,
Yeah.
where it'll be like, it's where it's hard for you to read. So it'll be like, you spend 2 hours on an abstract and then everyone's frustrated and disappointed.
Yeah. How much of that was the fear? I mean, like, how much of that was the confusion that you had that this criticism is not criticism of your writing, is what it is criticism of you?
Same sort of thing that we could talk about before when it came to like, I could understand it, but I still felt it. I couldn't separate that feeling. Like I still felt like a failure if there was criticism.
This is like it's very, very important. This is very important. And I wish I had a solution to put out there today that we're talking about. That, oh, if you do A and B and C, then that's going to be addressed. Like, but let's think about that. I mean, let's just like think loud a little bit here. What do you think can be done to make that separation for us to, when we are criticized for, I mean, for the work, written work that we submit, even today when I submit a proposal, it's just that fear of like rejection, not and not just because of the amount of work that's going to be wasted. It's just like the reflection that it has on me. And what do you think, I mean, can be done to help with that situation? Because it's not productive, it's not constructive at all.
No, I mean, it's definitely not. And I know this is something that, even when we started doing reviews, we'd sit down and you would tell me, like, this is not a reflection on you. Like, this is where you are in the learning process. This is going to make you better at it. I could hear that and it still wouldn't make the same impact. I think for me, one of the only things is making sure that the person you're getting feedback from first, you have that trust there. And I think so much of the graduate student success comes down to your relationship with your advisor or other mentors that you have, that you truly believe they want what's best for you and that they want you to succeed and that they believe in you. Because if you don't have that, you're always going to kind of question yourself. So, even now, I've gotten much better about it. If I submit something, I had you take a look at a proposal I was submitting, and you were able to give feedback like, "Oh, it's fine. Like it's not your best work.
Yeah.
There's nothing inherently wrong with it." And I was able to just take that and say, "That's true." I can see maybe I could have added to this area or made this a little bit more exciting, but it wasn't flawed. And I think you need to get to that point where you can take those smaller criticisms before you can take the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't read some, probably my first draft that I wrote one time, looking back now. I don't think I could get through that.
How much do you think for someone with dyslexia slash ADHD, delivering these writing assignments required to complete a PhD program should be a consideration? Is it something that they really need to put heavy thoughts into before they choose to do a PhD, or you assure them that this is not that bad, that it can be figured out? And I'm hoping to hear the second.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
definitely the second one. Because now that I'm in the advisor role, I can see it so much more clearly in terms of, how those skills can be built if you're working with someone that, is willing to work with you on it. Like there can be a lot of hand holding there.
Yeah.
And maybe some professors aren't willing to do that, but my mind is that maybe those are in really big research groups. There's probably maybe a postdoc that might be able to help with that, a more senior grad student. It can be figured out. That's why we have the paper structure that we have, at least in engineering. You're not going to have a one author paper for the most part. It's supposed to be a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And what those collaborations, what that order of author looks like, that's something to be figured out with the advisor. You're not on your own for that process.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. I agree with you. I want to ask you to think about your PhD student self and give yourself some advice on what kind of communications or self advocacy would be beneficial, would make things easier for that PhD student self of yours. If you think a couple of years back, what kind of advice do you give yourself that communicate this way, communicate this with these people, or make sure your communication covers these areas? Because I think a lot of the challenges students may feel is that some mismatch between the way things are perceived, situation that by the advisor and the students. So there is some gap there sometimes. I mean that it becomes wider and wider, and sometimes blows up. What's your advice to your PhD self?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple big things there. I think the first, maybe three. The first is to just be more honest with yourself. I feel like I was constantly in a cycle of, trying to convince myself to not kind of like hurt my own feelings. So just be honest with where I was at. And second, communicate that when I wasn't emotional. I feel like every time something came up, it's because it got to that last level, or it's I didn't sleep the night before, or something went wrong in the lab, or, if I was feeling overwhelmed or had broader questions, like those are discussions that need to happen when the emotion's not there. So,
And I can attest to the importance
yeah,
of that. As someone with ADHD, when emotions are hot, I mean that's the worst time you want to have a serious conversation with someone.
absolutely. And just so many discussions that we had where it ended up where I'd be like hostile and then just be crying. Nothing's going to get solved there. That's not putting the research on a good track. That's not helpful towards anything. And I think just being able to recognize that a little sooner and try and have those discussions early on. Because now sitting on the other side in the advisor role, I'm like, just let me know. Like I'm gonna be mad if I show up at the lab to test at 9 a.m. and things aren't ready. If you tell me the night before, like, hey, I'm not gonna be ready. Like, okay, great. I have plenty of things to keep me busy.
Yeah.
Just don't waste my time on those things.
So the first one was honesty with yourself.
Yeah.
The second one was right timing, right setting.
Yeah. And the third one is enjoy it. I was so trying to rush through the process. I didn't enjoy it. Trying to, like, this is like the safest space. You are not responsible for anything. Like your advisor is the one that is on the hook for all of these things. Like just don't feel that all intensely. Like it is such a safe space. You're able to explore these ideas. It's so unique. And in engineering, you're not paying for a degree and you're being paid.
So you can really enjoy doing what.
Like I wish, looking back, I felt so much pressure for all of these things, and it was just pressure I was putting on myself. It's now I actually am responsible to sponsors and doing all these things. And I look at my students, I'm like, you're living the life. Why are you so upset? I'm gonna get, you're fine. Like my goal is for this to work out, for you to graduate. Like you want them to succeed so much. Like there's no reason for you to be this worried.
If a neurodiverse student comes your way, what kind of considerations, implicit and explicit, you're gonna have interacting with that student?
I'd say at what level? Undergraduate student looking for advice, grad student working with me.
Yes.
Well, I have a neurodiverse graduate student working with me, and I have some neurotypical students as well. I think for all students, it just comes down to communication. biggest challenges today, and like we laugh about it now, is with the communication challenges between me and one of my neurotypical students. And a lot of that is probably on me, but just figuring out how to communicate needs and boundaries and expectations with each other is critical. And knowing that it's not going to be something that just picks up right off the bat. Like there needs to be that patience there on both ends, that I'm trying and you're trying, and hopefully it's the right fit.
Yeah.
You know, I feel really good about where things are at now, but sometimes it's not the right fit too. And I've already told my students that, like, hey, I want this to work. You know, I'm very committed to that. But just so you know, like, you have a lot of power in this situation. Like, if I'm not the right fit for you, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just find someone that
Yeah, it's
communicates
definitely a
differently.
mutual interaction. And I think we have to be open-minded again. I mean, like, not necessarily all advisors are have the right type of mindset to work with non-traditional. I'm not talking about patience. I'm not talking about being them being a bad person. I'm just like saying the same way that like not any two couples can marry and be happy forever. I mean, like there are a lot of like marriages that fail, and it's okay. It's okay that you start working with someone and then you give yourself enough time. Again, not when you're emotional, not you think like too much about one isolated situation. But if you think that there is always this mismatch between what is expected of you and what you think you can bring to the table, to look beyond that person. I mean, like that is something that a lot of students do for other reasons, for because like they don't have funding, or for example, they're like they're working on a project that may not like that much a research project. So I mean, like all of this conversation, it came to this point. I'm thinking about that, and one big thing that we missed, if you think about that, we've been focusing on all the challenges at multiple levels of in your past, but it's very important to say why we are doing this. It's not just to improve the number of students, neurodiverse students in graduate school. I personally, I believe that it is not something that I say to empower people. I'm a big believer of importance of neurodiversity as much as other types of visible diversity, because neurodiversity is important to be able to see the problem more holistically, to look at one problem from many different angles, to sweep through a wide range of solutions that may exist for a complex problem. And a lot of the challenges we see with our innovation, with things that we are so excited about, and it turns to be a disaster like of some sort, is maybe some of that is because of our too narrow vision, our view that we have, because everyone in that team thinks the same way. And obviously people who think the same way, they have the same kind of blind spots, so they may not see. And like, it's so important when you're talking about open-ended problem, about research, about things that they go to lead us to innovation. We have a full spectrum of thoughts and the way they look at problems. We need a person who can only see it at a very high level. We need a meticulous person that can work on the detail. And it's very difficult, honestly, to expect a person that to cover the entire spectrum, that you can work on the conceptual framing of a problem, and you're the most meticulous also executor at the same time. It rarely happens, but that is a wish, a false wish that our education system has, and it's failing over and over, not understanding that it is important to utilize the strengths of individual rather than changing them to become another brick in the wall, or molding them to form that standard, typical, ideal graduate student that everyone is thinking that kind of like is the best outcome of, for example, a graduate program. So thinking about the strengths that you personally have, and some of that is recognized by through multiple research projects. There are publications out there that they say that students with dyslexia, individuals with dyslexia, may have stronger visual spatial skills. They are better at understanding non-textual information, interpreting or presenting things in a non-textual fashion. So I know that very well, and I capitalized on that as soon as I realized that. I involved you in some of our challenging 3D modeling, figuring out like how things are done. I'm not talking about like you sitting in front of the computer coding something, but conceptualizing something. I involved you in some of which led to those publications actually that you mentioned outside your PhD work. I want you to speak to that, to talk about that.
Sure. I think one of the biggest strengths has been in, conveying information in a different way. So I have always enjoyed talking to people, presenting, and finding opportunities to share information in a way that wasn't just a written presentation. Yeah. And I think particularly in grad school, I saw more so in some of the classes being able to do alternative assignments where, can I put together a video series rather than writing a paper, and having that be encouraged. And when it comes to kind of presenting at conferences, being able to capitalize on those skills, or put together a series of training videos rather than a written training manual. And I feel like those products are so well received. And that's how I prefer to communicate. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worked really well. I think it's something that's now encouraged. And I hope other students, that may be similar in that way, can find those areas, where they excel. Because that's something for me that I did get the confidence from, being able to go give a presentation to a broad room of experts and feeling confident about it, where I could feel great in that role. Whereas submitting a paper, it maybe made me, more hesitant. It wasn't something I was looking forward to. Mm-hmm. I like the pre-presentation jitters. I like talking to people afterwards. Of course, because it's fun. Like, it's all about the visuals.
And imagine, like, if as opposed to that, like, 30 slide presentation, you were to write like a 3-page report, how much of grind and suffering.
I wouldn't go. It's a lot of the conferences that I feel like I went to, it wasn't something I had to do,
We covered a lot of ground here, Lexi. Thank you. It was educational for me even here listening to you. I'm happy that you could touch on some of very deep fundamental problems that cause those of like feelings of anxiety, depression, hesitation, lack of interest, disengagement during an undergraduate degree or graduate degree. I didn't have this as part of the podcast layout that we think about off the book, but now that you started as a faculty member, I want to get your opinion on. I went through that. I'm a professor, so hopefully I'm not going to be reviewed or evaluated anymore for any promotion. So I'm done with it. But
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. How do you feel about that? What are if you had all freedom to change some of the designs of academia today, so they are more conducive to non-traditional faculty members? I mean, like someone with dyslexia. I mean, you can speak to that because of your first-hand experiences. What would you change in the academia today? If you're not comfortable talking about that, we can skip this question, or I can fill in.
I feel like I'm too comfortable. I feel like it's not till after the fact. Maybe that's just I jump on things a little too early, and then there'll be someone watching this who's trying to write me a letter in a few years. the alternative modes, and this is all coming from, I had a conversation with one of my current PhD students in terms of how to share information. I think that papers aren't always the best way. We're trying to, which, surprise, I was just telling you about this for the first time. We want to make an interactive website to be able to look at responses from a bridge monitoring project. Because I think that's going to add to the field way more than a paper. You know, we've written a couple papers on it. That's not going to provide more. But for people who want to understand what's the location of the sensors, you know, where is this data coming from? What does it look like up there? How did this change over time? Being able to move something, that's way more involved in a paper.
So like that sensor data, videos,
Everything
that's
on
amazing.
one contained page.
So as if they're just going there.
Yeah, you want to, oh yeah, how did this strain change over time? Oh, I can move a lever and look at process data for this specific gauge. Because then other people can actually reuse your data. You know, I feel like there's so much talk in academia about like, ooh, make your data publicly available.
Yeah.
But we've done data processing from experimental work.
Yeah.
If you have not worked with that data, you're not doing anything with it. Maybe the main, like, a force displacement curve.
Yeah.
Maybe. But that's not going to add that much value.
Right.
So I wish that, you know, that would be accepted. I don't know how it's going to go. I'm planning on trialing it with a student who will have the 3-paper minimum.
Let's explore that. I mean, there are some data format papers that I'm seeing journals are accepting. So definitely that's something worth exploring. So that is on the publication side. How about something like proposal? I mean, like thinking about like NSF, National Science Foundation, they have only one way of accepting proposals, and that is a 15-page for typical projects, 15-page written proposal plus 400 pages of supplementary documents.
Yeah, so there's so much kind of extra information that comes with submitting a proposal. And I think so much of it's not necessary. Like the formatting.
When you say necessary from your view, I mean, probably they have reasons for asking us to submit all of these.
I think the reasons are good. That's what's hard for me. I think the reason and the rationale is there, but I think I could accomplish all of that with a 2-minute video.
So implementation.
Yeah, I just wish that I could sit down and record a video and say, hey, here are my other projects that I'm working on. Here's how they're related to each other. And I'm having the university sign off that I'm not going to get overpaid and I have enough effort to fulfill this on. Like, do I really need to fill out a form that says how much effort I have on each project?
I mean, you know how much trouble I have with forms, and when it comes to form, I mean, like I run around, see who is in the corridor. I can kind of pull to my office that they can help with me. It's just like it's paralyzing for me. I mean, when I look at the form and I say, okay, it should be done. There's a deadline for that. It's just like that's the last thing I want to do. I want to ask the final question: what gives you motivation when you wake up? You think about your day, what gets you out of the bed? What is that drives you on good days and bad days?
I'll start with the actual thing that gets me out of bed is that Andy, my old dog, wears diapers and doesn't get out of bed till I do. So that's the realistic answer. But I would say when it comes to kind of like showing up for work and being excited about the day, it's shifted, I'd say within the last couple of years. Everything used to be very kind of like deliverable oriented. Like every day was just like, what can I get done and maybe cross off the to-do list. And it's shifted a little bit more now to like, how can I work towards maybe the broader goals of the projects that I have and make sure that my students are moving forward. I think that's been the main shift, is thinking about what I need to do for them in the day rather than what do I need to do for myself.
I I have to tell you that I enjoyed. It was an honor and pleasure for me to work with you as an undergraduate student, as a graduate student, and also now as a colleague. And you know that I don't need to say that, but I see a very bright future for you in this field, considering that you're approaching it so holistically. You're valuing experiences of those that they work with you. You think about their personal, professional development. You care about the quality of your work. You already have a head start. So, for all of those reasons, I think that you chose the right type of job, and it gives you the reach you need to really help those that they have this interest, they have this passion, and they want to do it, they don't know how to do it, or they may think that they can't do it. And I'm so hopeful about what future is going to bring to you, and I wish you the best of luck. Honestly, that it's been always a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to many years in future too.
Many more collaborations.
Thank you very much again for your time. I think we successfully touched on many important things about your primary middle school age years, the impact of some of those experiences on your confidence, how college worked out for you, and how things changed when you came to grad school, some issues related to writing. And I hope our audience, they learned from this. I know that we didn't present any bullet list that do 1, 2, 3 to succeed, but I hope just the conversation and listening to the point of view of someone who went through this from childhood to now being a university professor is helpful in different ways. And I really hope to see at some point in near future, we don't need to record a podcast like this. There is no justification for that. That would be the ideal time. Honestly, that would be the best. So if you have the last word to share with us, then we can
Yeah,
wrap
I'd
it
say
up.
just thank you so much for having me. And I think the more we can have these kind of open discussions, the better. So it's something that, I didn't talk about probably until grad school. And it is very freeing in that sense. And, it's part of myself that I wouldn't change for anything. So I hope other people, come to terms with that with themselves as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this wraps up this episode of our podcast. I hope it was something that you benefited from. Our plan is to talk to other students like Lexi who went through graduate education with their unique experiences. I try to invite people from different groups of neurodiverse individuals to this podcast so we can hear from a wide range of voices. If you liked it, please share it with friends, with those that you think they in one way they're gonna benefit from this if they listen to it. And please subscribe so you're notified when we post the future episodes of the podcast. I also need to thank the National Science Foundation for supporting our efforts that made this possible. And I look forward to our future episodes. Bye.